The metal walls of the Karathi research ship gleamed under the bright white lights. Commander Zekthul walked through the long hallway, his four eyes scanning the data pad in his thin, gray hands. His species had studied hundreds of different life forms across the galaxy, but these new specimens were different. They were humans, and the initial scans showed something strange about their bodies. 3 humans sat in separate glass cells, each one calm despite being prisoners. Jack Morrison, a tall man with rough hands from years of fixing machines, leaned against the wall of his cell. He watched the aliens move around with curious eyes, not fear. In the next cell, Lisa Grant sat cross-legged on the floor. She had worked as a medical officer on the colony ship, and her trained eyes studied every detail of her captors. Kyle Roberts, younger than the other 2, paced slowly in the third cell. He had loaded cargo for 3 years, and his strong build showed. Zekthul stopped in front of the cells and spoke through the translation device. "You are here for scientific research. We will not harm you permanently. We simply need to understand your species better." Jack laughed, which confused the commander. Most species begged or threatened when captured. "Well, that's a relief," Jack said. "I thought you were going to eat us or something worse." The commander's assistant, Velnara, floated beside him on her hover platform. Her species had evolved on a low-gravity world, and she moved like she was swimming through air. "Should we begin the first test, Commander?" "Yes." "Start with temperature. Resistance. Our records show humans come from a world with extreme climate variations. Let us see if this is true." They moved Jack to the testing chamber first. The room was plain white with vents in the walls and cameras in every corner. Jack stood in the center, wearing the simple gray clothes they had given him. The temperature display on the wall showed 72 degrees Fahrenheit. "We will lower the temperature slowly," Zekthul announced. "Tell us when you feel discomfort." The numbers began to drop. 60 degrees, 50 degrees, 40 degrees. Jack rubbed his arms but stayed standing. At 30 degrees, his breath became visible in the air, small clouds that fascinated the watching aliens. "Are you in pain?" Velnara asked. "Cold, sure, but I've worked in freezers colder than this," Jack replied. "My uncle had an ice fishing cabin in Minnesota. Now that was cold. This is just uncomfortable." The temperature hit 15 degrees. Jack was shivering now, his body shaking to generate heat, but he remained conscious and alert. The Karathi scientists whispered among themselves. Most species would have gone into shock by now. They raised the temperature back to normal and brought in Lisa. This time, they tested pressure changes. The chamber could simulate different atmospheric pressures, from the thin air of high mountains to the crushing weight of deep ocean. Lisa sat calmly as they increased the pressure. Her ears popped, and she worked her jaw to equalize them. "Just like scuba diving," she said to herself. The pressure that would have caused most aliens to pass out only made her slightly dizzy. She controlled her breathing, slow and steady, adapting to each change. "Remarkable," Zekthul noted. "Her body adjusts automatically. She doesn't even seem distressed." Kyle's test involved electrical pulses. Small shocks ran through pads attached to his arms. He gritted his teeth at the sensation but didn't cry out. The electricity that would paralyze a Karathi only made his muscles twitch. "It's like those electric muscle stimulators at the gym," Kyle said, trying to make conversation with his captors. "Though yours pack more of a punch." Over the next few days, the tests continued. The Karathi discovered that humans could function with less sleep than most species. Jack told them about working double shifts at the colony. They learned that humans could go days without food, their bodies switching to burn stored fat. Lisa explained how she had fasted for medical training. They found that humans could ignore certain types of pain entirely when focused on a task. Kyle demonstrated by holding a difficult position until his muscles burned, all while carrying on a normal conversation. But what confused the Karathi most was the humans' attitude. They weren't breaking down psychologically. They made jokes about their situation. They asked questions about Karathi technology. They seemed more interested in their captors than afraid of them. During a rest period, the 3 humans were allowed to see each other through the glass walls of their cells. They couldn't hear each other, but they used simple hand signals and facial expressions to communicate. Jack pointed to various parts of the ship, counting on his fingers. Lisa nodded and held up different numbers. Kyle made walking motions with his fingers and pointed to the door mechanisms. Velnara noticed this exchange and mentioned it to the commander. They seem to be studying us as much as we study them. Zekthul dismissed her concern. Let them observe. They are primitive compared to us. What could they possibly learn that would matter? But Velnara watched the humans more carefully after that. She saw how Jack always touched the walls when they moved him, feeling for vibrations. She noticed Lisa counting the seconds between guard changes. She observed Kyle testing the strength of different materials in his cell, pressing against them with calculated force. One day, during a nutrition test, Lisa made an interesting comment. You know, pain isn't really the enemy, she said as she ate the tasteless protein blocks they provided. Pain is just your body's alarm system. It tells you something needs attention. The trick isn't to avoid it, but to understand what it's telling you. The Karathi scientists recorded this, adding it to their growing database. They had expected humans to be tough based on preliminary reports, but this was different. These humans weren't just enduring pain. They were analyzing it, categorizing it, and filing it away as useful information. As the first week ended, Commander Zekthul reviewed all the data. The humans showed stress responses to all the tests, but none that significantly impaired their function. Their bodies seemed designed to handle trauma and recover quickly. Even more interesting was their psychological resilience. They maintained hope and humor despite their situation. We need to increase the intensity, Zekthul decided. We haven't found their limits yet. Velnara floated closer to her commander. Sir, perhaps we should consider that they might not have limits in the traditional sense. Their evolution seems to have taken a different path. Nonsense. Every species has a breaking point. We just haven't found the right pressure to apply. But, as she watched the humans that night, Velnara wondered if her commander was wrong. Jack was doing push-ups in his cell, counting quietly to himself. Lisa was stretching, keeping her body limber despite the confinement. Kyle was standing perfectly still, but his eyes tracked every movement outside his cell, memorizing patterns. They weren't acting like prisoners or test subjects. They were acting like soldiers preparing for something. The question was, preparing for what? The answer would come sooner than any of the Karathi expected. The humans had been patient, gathering information, learning about their captors. Every test revealed weaknesses in the ship's systems. Every interaction taught them more about Karathi psychology. They were playing a longer game than their captors realized. In his cell, Jack smiled to himself as he felt the ship's engine vibrations through the floor. He had figured out the maintenance schedule. Lisa had decoded the basic medical readings on their monitoring equipment. Kyle had identified which walls were structural and which were just partitions. They weren't just surviving the experiments. They were preparing to flip the script entirely. The Karathi wanted to understand human pain tolerance. They were about to learn that humans were most dangerous, not when they were comfortable, but when they were pushed to their limits. The experiments would continue, but the real test had only just begun. The second week brought new challenges. Commander Zekthul had spent days analyzing the data from the first rounds of testing, and he was not satisfied. The humans had endured everything too easily. He needed to push harder, to find the point, where human resilience finally failed. Jack woke to find his cell completely dark. Not just dim, but absolutely black. The Karathi had removed all light sources. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Along with the darkness came silence. The usual hum of the ship's engines was gone. They had soundproofed his cell completely. For most species, sensory deprivation caused panic within hours. The mind, without input, began to create its own reality. Hallucinations were common. Fear was inevitable. Jack sat in the darkness and started to hum. When he couldn't hear his own voice, he began tapping his fingers against his leg, feeling the rhythm even if he couldn't hear it. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Without light or sound, time lost meaning. But Jack had worked in mine shafts where equipment failures meant absolute darkness. He had learned a trick from an old miner. He began to tell himself stories, creating elaborate tales in his mind. He built imaginary machines, piece by piece, visualizing every bolt and wire. He composed songs, hearing them perfectly in his memory. When the lights finally came back on after 72 hours, the Karathi expected to find him broken. Instead, Jack was doing one-handed push-ups, having kept track of time through exercise routines. "That was interesting," he said, blinking in the bright light. "Got a lot of thinking done. I figured out how to improve the cooling system on those old Morgan-class engines. Want to hear about it?" Zekthul's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion. The human had used the isolation as an opportunity for creative problem-solving. This was not in any of their models. Lisa faced a different test. They put her in scenarios designed to trigger deep, primal fears. The room filled with the sound of predators, though none were actually there. Shadows moved in ways that suggested threats. The floor would suddenly tilt or drop a few inches, triggering the fear of falling. She sat in the center of the room, controlling her breathing. "Fear is just chemistry," she told herself, repeating lessons from her medical training. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, chemical signals that can be managed. The Karathi watched her vital signs spike with each scare, then slowly return to baseline. She was afraid, that was clear, but she wasn't controlled by the fear. When spider-like creatures seemed to crawl across the walls, she observed them carefully. "Projections," she said out loud. "Good resolution, but the shadow angles are wrong. Light source would need to be here." She pointed to a spot on the ceiling. "But it's actually there. Nice try, though." She had turned their test into a puzzle, analyzing each fear trigger like a scientist studying a specimen. After 12 hours, she had identified patterns in their scare tactics. "You're using a modified random sequence," she announced to the watching aliens. "But it's not truly random. Your computer favors certain combinations. The spider things always come after the falling sensation, never before. The predator sounds increase in volume by roughly 12% each time. You might want to work on that." Kyle's test pushed his body to its physical limits. They had him run on a treadmill that increased speed gradually. Most species would collapse when their muscles ran out of immediate energy. But humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of outlasting prey through sheer endurance. Kyle ran, and ran, and ran. His body hurt, his lungs burned, but he kept going. After 2 hours, something strange happened. The pain seemed to fade into background noise. His body found a rhythm, a second wind that the Karathi had never seen before. "Humans are insane," one of the junior scientists muttered. "He should be unconscious." Kyle heard this through the translator and laughed, though it came out as more of a wheeze. "You should see a marathon, or better yet, an ultramarathon. People run for 24 hours straight just for fun." When he finally stopped after 4 hours, not from exhaustion but because the treadmill's motor overheated, Kyle asked for water and a protein bar. Within an hour, he was ready to go again. The Karathi held emergency meetings. These humans weren't responding according to any known patterns. Pain seemed to make them more focused, not less. Challenges made them creative rather than desperate. Velnara presented a disturbing theory to the commander. "Sir, what if pain serves a different purpose for humans? What if they've evolved to use it as a tool rather than just a warning?" Zekthul rejected this idea. "That's impossible. Pain is universally negative. It exists to prevent damage." "But look at their history," Velnara insisted, pulling up data about Earth. "They lived on a world with predators, disasters, diseases, and extreme weather. They didn't develop technology to avoid these things. They developed technology while experiencing them. They built their civilization not in spite of suffering but through it." The commander was about to dismiss this when an alert sounded. Kyle had collapsed in his cell. The medical readings showed dangerous levels of stress hormones and muscle damage. Finally, they had pushed too hard. Lisa saw Kyle fall through the glass wall between their cells. She immediately began gesturing, trying to get the attention of the guards. When they brought her to Kyle's cell to provide medical assistance, she quickly assessed his condition. "He needs electrolytes and protein," she said. "His body went into rhabdomyolysis. The muscle tissue is breaking down too fast. This is treatable, but he needs care now." The Karathi let her work, fascinated by her immediate switch from test subject to medical professional. She showed no concern for her own situation, focused entirely on helping Kyle recover. Jack was brought in as well, and he helped support Kyle while Lisa worked. The three humans together presented a different dynamic than when separated. They communicated efficiently, each taking on roles without discussion. Jack became the engineer, finding ways to create tools from the limited supplies. Lisa was the medic, treating Kyle with skilled hands. Kyle, even weakened, became their tactical observer, noticing details about guard positions and security protocols. "Heal. Be fine," Lisa announced after an hour. "Humans can recover from this. We're designed to push ourselves to these limits and then heal stronger. It's called supercompensation." The Karathi recorded everything, but they were beginning to feel uneasy. These humans weren't just test subjects anymore. They were demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything the Karathi thought they knew about biological limits. That night, Velnara reviewed the footage of the three humans together. She noticed something subtle but important. They had been communicating in ways beyond words. Small touches that conveyed information, eye movements that indicated directions, finger taps that might be some kind of code. She brought her concerns to Zekthul again. "Commander, I believe they're planning something. They're primitive beings in our most secure facility," Zekthul responded. What could they possibly plan? But even he was beginning to doubt. The humans showed no despair, no breakdown of hope. That typically came with captivity. If anything, they seemed to be gaining confidence with each test. Jack had started joking with the guards. Lisa was teaching some of the younger scientists about human biology. Kyle, once recovered, began helping, with equipment maintenance, claiming he was bored. The tests continued, but the dynamic had shifted. The Karathi were no longer confident predators studying prey. They were beginning to feel like they were being studied in return. Every test revealed as much about them as it did about the humans. During one rest period, Jack made a comment that stuck with Velnara. "You know, where we come from, the best way to understand something is to experience it yourself. That's why human scientists often test things on themselves first. How can you understand pain if you've never really felt it?" The Karathi had evolved on a paradise world. They had never needed to develop pain tolerance because their environment had never demanded it. Their technology protected them from all discomfort. But now, studying these humans, some of them began to wonder what they were missing. Zekthul found himself thinking about Jack's question late into the night cycle. His species had conquered space, developed amazing technology, and studied countless worlds. But had they ever truly been tested? Had they ever had to earn their place in the universe through struggle? The humans seemed to sense this shift in thinking. They became more cooperative, more willing to explain their responses to the tests. But they were also learning, constantly learning, about every aspect of the ship and its crew. The second week ended with an uncomfortable realization for the Karathi. They had set out to find the limits of human pain tolerance. Instead, they were discovering that humans might not have limits in the traditional sense. They had something else, something the Karathi hadn't anticipated. They had the ability to transform suffering into strength, to use pain as a teacher rather than an enemy. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they seemed to be enjoying the challenge. The third week brought a change in approach. Commander Zekthul had decided that physical pain wasn't enough. If these humans could endure and even thrive under bodily stress, perhaps emotional and psychological pain would reveal their true limits. The testing chamber transformed into a holographic environment. Lisa stood in what appeared to be a hospital on Earth, watching patients die from a disease she couldn't cure. The simulation was perfect, down to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of heart monitors flattening. She watched holographic humans beg for help she couldn't give, The Karathi expected breakdown, tears, collapse. Instead, Lisa began to speak calmly and clearly. "I've seen this before," she said, knowing they were recording. "Not exactly this, but close enough. There was a plague on Colony 7. We lost 30% of the population before we found a treatment. I was one of 3 doctors for 10,000 people." She walked through the holographic hospital, observing the dying patients without flinching. "You want to know what broke me then? It wasn't the death. Death is part of life. What nearly broke me was thinking I wasn't doing enough. But then I realized something. Every person I saved meant 10 more would live because of what I learned. Treating them." She turned to face the observation window where she knew the Karathi were watching. "Pain and loss are teachers. The plague taught me to be a better doctor. These deaths," she gestured to the holograms, "aren't real, but the lesson is. You can't save everyone, but you can learn from every loss." Jack faced his own emotional trial. The chamber showed him Earth being destroyed, cities burning, billions dying. His family, friends, everyone he had ever known gone in nuclear fire and environmental collapse. The simulation was drawn from historical data about Earth's near misses with destruction, made viscerally real. He sat down in the middle of the chaos and closed his eyes. "My grandfather lived through World War III, he said quietly. He told me about the bombs, the radiation, the winter that lasted 2 years. He lost everything. His whole family died in the first exchange." Jack opened his eyes and looked at the destruction around him. "But he survived. Met my grandmother in a refugee camp they rebuilt. Had kids, those kids had kids. And here I am in space because humans don't give up. We've almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times and we always come back stronger." He stood and walked through the burning holographic city. "You're showing me humanity's worst nightmare, but it's also our history. We've survived versions of this, we've learned from them. That's why we're out here in the stars now, spreading out so no single disaster can end us." Kyle's test was more personal. They showed him his hometown being destroyed by natural disasters while he was helpless to stop it. His family calling for help he couldn't give. His younger sister trapped in a collapsed building. This one worked, at least partially. Kyle's eyes filled with tears. His fists clenched. He tried to run toward the holographic victims even though he knew they weren't real. But then something interesting happened. He began to organize rescue efforts with the holographic survivors, directing them, creating order from chaos. "This is what we do," he said through gritted teeth. "When everything falls apart, we come together. We help each other. That's the human way." He was crying, but he was also working, planning, solving problems even in a simulation. The Karathi scientists were disturbed by these responses. The humans weren't just enduring emotional pain, they were contextualizing it, learning from it, using it as motivation. Every trauma seemed to unlock some deeper reserve of strength. Velnara approached the commander with a radical suggestion. "Sir, perhaps we should try a different approach. Instead of trying to break them, what if we tried to understand them?" "That's what we're doing," Zekthul insisted. "No, sir. We're testing them like we test all species. But humans aren't like other species. What if we asked them to teach us?" The commander's 4 eyes narrowed. "They are the subjects. We are the researchers." But Velnara had been watching, learning. "Sir, have you noticed that they've been teaching us all along? Every response includes a lesson. They're not just enduring our tests, they're trying to help us understand." That night, Velnara did something against protocol. She visited Lisa's cell alone, lowering the security barriers slightly so they could talk more naturally. "Why aren't you afraid?" she asked directly. Lisa smiled. "I am afraid, but fear isn't the opposite of courage. Fear is what makes courage possible. You can't be brave if you're not scared first. But you could die here. We could hurt you permanently." "I could die anywhere," Lisa replied. "A micrometeorite could punch through the hull of my colony ship. A disease could take me. An accident could end everything. Death is always possible. So we focus on life instead." "That seems illogical." Lisa laughed. "Maybe. But it works for us. Can I ask you something? What's the worst pain your species has ever experienced? Velnara thought about it. I don't know. We've never had to experience significant pain. Our world was peaceful. Our technology protects us. Then how do you know you're alive? Lisa asked gently. How do you know what you're capable of if you've never been tested? The question haunted Velnara. She found herself thinking about it as she watched the continuing tests. The humans were displaying something beyond mere endurance. They had a relationship with suffering that the Karathi couldn't understand because they had never experienced it themselves. Jack began telling stories during his tests, talking about human history. He spoke of explorers who died trying to reach the poles of Earth, of astronauts who knew they might not return, of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when challenged. We went to our moon in a tin can powered by controlled explosions, he said during one particularly difficult pressure test. The computer had less power than a calculator, but we went anyway. That's what humans do. We see something impossible, and we try it anyway. Kyle started exercising with the younger Karathi scientists, teaching them human fitness routines. They could barely handle a fraction of what he considered a warm-up, but he encouraged them, showing them how to build strength. Gradually. Pain is just weakness leaving the body, he told them, though he said it with a grin that suggested he didn't entirely believe the old military saying. But really, controlled stress makes you stronger. That's true for muscles, bones, minds, even spirits. The three humans had begun to transform their captivity into something else. They were no longer just prisoners or test subjects. They had become teachers, philosophers, and in a strange way, friends to some of the younger Karathi. During one group test, where all three humans were subjected to the same stressor simultaneously, they did something that amazed the watchers. They began to sing. It was an old Earth song, something about standing together and not giving up. Their voices weren't perfect and the harmony was rough, but they sang through the pain using music to synchronize their endurance. How does singing help? Zekthul demanded. It connects us, Jack explained. Shared rhythm, shared purpose. We're not suffering alone. We're suffering together. That makes it bearable. The Karathi had no concept of this. Their species had never needed to develop such coping mechanisms. They began to realize that human strength wasn't individual, but collective. Each human was strong, but together they were something more. Velnara began secretly recording not just the tests but the conversations between tests. She noticed that the humans were constantly processing their experiences, turning them into narratives, lessons, even jokes. They were metabolizing trauma in real time, converting it into something useful. Commander, she said during one meeting, I believe we've been wrong about pain. Explain. We see pain as purely negative, something to be avoided. But humans see it as information, as a teacher, as a tool for growth. They don't just endure pain, they transform it. Zekthul considered this. If that's true, then we've been measuring the wrong thing. We've been looking for their breaking point when perhaps they don't have one in the traditional sense. Or perhaps, Velnara suggested carefully, their breaking point isn't about how much pain they can take, but about losing their purpose for enduring it. This thought led to a new realization. The humans had been enduring everything because they had a reason to. They were protecting each other, teaching the Karathi, and possibly planning something the aliens still didn't understand. As the third week ended, the dynamic in the research vessel had completely changed. The Karathi were no longer confident in their superiority. Some of them had even begun to exercise with Kyle, to listen to Jack's stories, to ask Lisa about human medicine and philosophy. The experiment was evolving, but not in the way anyone had expected. The Karathi had set out to study human pain tolerance. Instead, they were discovering something about themselves, about what they lacked, and about what it truly meant to be tested. Late one night, Jack made a comment that would change everything. You know, he said to a young Karathi scientist, you've learned a lot about our pain tolerance, but you haven't experienced it yourselves. In human science, we call that incomplete data. How can you truly understand something you've never felt? The scientist reported this to Velnara, who brought it to Zekthul. The commander stood at the observation window, watching the three humans sleep peacefully in their cells despite everything. The transformation began with a simple question from Jack during what the Karathi thought was a routine morning interview. He sat across from Commander Zekthul, his hands folded calmly on the metal table between them. "Have you ever wondered," Jack asked, his voice casual but his eyes intense, "what your own pain tolerance is?" The commander's four eyes blinked in their peculiar sequence, two at a time. "We are conducting the research here, human. You are the subject." "Sure," Jack agreed, leaning back in his chair. "But good science needs a control group, doesn't it? How can you measure human pain tolerance if you don't have a baseline? How can you understand our responses if you've never felt what we're feeling?" The seed was planted. Zekthul dismissed Jack, but the question lingered. That afternoon, he found himself discussing it with his senior staff. "The human makes a point," admitted Chirval, one of the younger scientists. "We have no personal frame of reference. We're observing reactions we've never experienced." "That's because we're civilized," another scientist argued. "We've evolved beyond the need for pain tolerance." "Have we evolved beyond it? Or have we simply avoided it?" Velnara asked. "There's a difference between transcending something and hiding from it." The debate continued for hours. Meanwhile, the humans were having their own discussion. They had been allowed a shared mealtime, sitting together in a common area under heavy guard. But guards couldn't stop them from talking. "They're curious," Lisa said quietly, eating the bland protein cubes they were given. "I can see it in the younger ones especially. They want to understand, but they're afraid." "Fear of pain is natural," Kyle said. "But they've made it into something bigger than it needs to be. They've never stubbed a toe or gotten a paper cut. Every kind of pain is unknown to them." Jack nodded. "Which means when they finally do experience it, they have no context, no coping mechanisms. They're like children who've never fallen down. So we teach them," Lisa said. "Gently. We show them that pain isn't the enemy they think it is." Over the next few days, the humans began demonstrating different kinds of voluntary discomfort. Jack would hold his breath for long periods, explaining to watching scientists how it felt and why he could manage it. Lisa pricked her finger with a small, sharp edge she found, showing them the tiny drop of blood and explaining how such minor injuries were part of human childhood. Kyle did wall sits, holding the position until his muscles shook, narrating the sensation. "It burns," he said, "but it's a good burn. It means the muscles are working, getting stronger. Tomorrow I'll be able to hold it longer." The Karathi were fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. Some of them began to try small experiments on themselves. Kirval attempted to hold his breath like Jack had demonstrated. He lasted 15 seconds before panicking. Jack coached him through it, teaching him to stay calm, to accept the discomfort rather than fight it. "Your body wants to breathe," Jack explained. "That's good. That's your survival instinct. But you can choose to override it for a short time. It's about knowing the difference between discomfort and actual danger." More Karathi began participating. They discovered that their bodies could handle more than they thought. Yes, things hurt, but the pain didn't destroy them. Some even found a strange satisfaction in pushing through discomfort. Velnara was one of the first to try a real physical challenge. She attempted Kyle's exercise routine, modified for her lighter gravity physiology. She couldn't do much, but Kyle encouraged her. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said. "The first push-up I ever did, I couldn't even do it properly. Now I can do hundreds. It's not about being strong right away. It's about getting stronger every day." Commander Zekthul watched all of this with growing concern and curiosity. His crew was changing. They were becoming different, more confident in some ways, more questioning in others. They were starting to see the humans not as subjects, but as examples. Then Lisa made a proposal that changed everything. "You want to understand human pain tolerance," she said during one of her sessions with Zekthul, "but you're missing the most important element. Humans endure pain better when we're doing it for others, not just ourselves. Let us show you." "What do you mean?" "A joint test," Lisa explained. Us and you. Together. We'll go through the same challenge at the same time. We'll coach you through it, help you understand not just what we're feeling, but why we can endure it. Zekthul's pride wouldn't let him refuse. He was the commander, the lead researcher. If his subordinates were experimenting on themselves, he had to show leadership. The test they designed was comprehensive but not dangerous. It would involve cold exposure, mild electrical stimulation, and physical exertion. Nothing that would cause permanent damage, but enough to be genuinely uncomfortable for the Karathi. 3 Karathi volunteered to join the 3 humans, Commander Zekthul, Velnara, and young Kirval. They stood in the testing chamber together, Karathi and humans side by side. As the temperature began to drop, the Karathi immediately began to show distress. Their species had never experienced real cold, but the humans began to coach them. Don't fight the shivering, Jack told Zekthul. That's your body generating heat. Work with it, not against it. Focus on your breathing, Lisa instructed Velnara. Deep, steady breaths. The cold is just a sensation. You're safe. Think about something else, Kyle suggested to Kirval. I think about building things. What do you think about? As the test continued, something remarkable happened. The Karathi began to adapt. Not just physically, but mentally. They started using the techniques the humans were teaching them. When the electrical pulses came, they breathed through them. When they had to run, they found rhythms that worked for their bodies. Zekthul was struggling the most. His position had always protected him from any discomfort. But as he ran on the treadmill, feeling his unused muscles protest, Jack ran beside him. You're doing great, Jack encouraged. This is what growth feels like. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, it wouldn't make you stronger. Why? Zekthul gasped. Why do you choose this? Because the hard things are worth doing, Jack replied. Because when you push through pain, you discover who you really are. You discover what you're capable of. Lisa was helping Velnara through a particularly difficult moment when the assistant was ready to give up. Pain is temporary, Lisa said. But quitting lasts forever. You're stronger than you think. Trust me. And surprisingly, Velnara did trust her. She pushed through, lasting another minute, then another. When she finally stopped, she felt something she had never experienced before. Pride. Real, earned pride. Kyle and Kirval had developed an unexpected friendship. The young Karathi scientist was fascinated by human training methods, and Kyle was a patient teacher. Your species is actually pretty tough, Kyle said. You just never had a reason to develop that toughness. It's like a muscle you've never used. But it's there. The test lasted 2 hours. By the end, all 6 participants were exhausted. The Karathi collapsed, overwhelmed by sensations they had never felt before. But they were also exhilarated. They had done something they never thought possible. I understand now, Zekthul said, still breathing heavily. It's not about the absence of pain. It's about the presence of purpose. You endure because you choose to, because it means something. And together, Lisa added, we endure better together than alone. The change in the ship was immediate and profound. The Karathi who had participated in the test were different. They walked differently, talked differently. They had been through something transformative. Other crew members wanted to try. Small groups began training with the humans, learning not just about pain tolerance, but about growth, challenge, and the satisfaction of overcoming obstacles. But perhaps the biggest change was in how they viewed the humans. They were no longer test subjects. They were teachers, mentors, and in some cases, friends. Velnara came to Lisa one evening with a confession. We've been wrong about everything, she said. Pain isn't something to be avoided at all costs. It's information. It's a teacher. It shows us our limits so we can push past them. You're learning, Lisa smiled. That's what makes intelligent species special. We can learn from anything, even suffering. Jack had been working with the engineering team, showing them how humans had developed technology not in spite of physical challenges, but because of them. Necessity is the mother of invention, he explained. When things are hard, we get creative. Kyle had started a fitness group that met every day. Karathi crew members would attempt human exercises, always scaled to their abilities, always encouraged to push just a little harder than the day before. The research mission had completely transformed. They were no longer studying human pain, tolerance from a distance. They were experiencing it, learning from it, growing from it. One night, Zekthul called Velnara to his office. "We need to make a decision about the humans," he said. "Sir? They're not prisoners anymore. They haven't been for some time. They're something else. Teachers, catalysts. They've changed us." Velnara nodded. "They've shown us something we were missing. Something we didn't even know we needed. The question is," Zekthul continued, "what do we do now? We can't keep them here, but we also can't just let this end." The answer would come from the humans themselves. They had been. The morning started like any other on the Karathi research vessel, but Jack, Lisa, and Kyle knew it would be different. They had spent weeks preparing, learning, teaching, and waiting. Today, they would reveal the truth that the Karathi were only beginning to understand. Commander Zekthul called them to the main laboratory, not as prisoners but as guests. The energy field barriers were lowered, the guards stood relaxed, and several dozen Karathi crew members had gathered to observe. Over the past weeks, these aliens had become students, training partners, and in some cases, friends. "We have a proposal," Jack announced, standing before the assembled group. "One final experiment, the ultimate test of pain tolerance. But this time, it's not just about humans. It's about all of us." Velnara floated forward on her hover platform. "What kind of test?" Lisa stepped up beside Jack. "We'll design the most challenging trial yet. Physical, mental, and emotional stress combined. But here's the difference. We'll all do it together. Humans and Karathi, equal partners. And," Kyle added, "we'll show you the real secret of human endurance. The one thing we haven't fully explained yet." Zekthul's 4 eyes showed interest and concern in equal measure. "What secret?" "Humans are strongest when we're protecting others," Jack explained. "When we're helping someone else get through something difficult. We want to show you what that really means." The Karathi discussed among themselves. Many were eager to try, having gained confidence from weeks of training. Others were hesitant, remembering how difficult even simple exercises had been at first. "I'll do it," Zekthul announced. "Whatever this test is, I'll participate." "So will I," Velnara added. One by one, 12 Karathi volunteered. They would join the 3 humans in whatever challenge was designed. The humans spent the day preparing the test with Karathi technicians. It would take place in the largest chamber on the ship, big enough for all 15 participants. The challenge would cycle through different stressors: cold, heat, physical challenges, problem-solving under pressure, and scenarios designed to test emotional resilience. But the humans had added something special. The test would require cooperation. No one could complete it alone. Karathi would have to help humans, and humans would have to help Karathi. Success would only come through working together. The next morning, all 15 participants stood in the chamber. The Karathi were nervous but determined. They had trained for this, learned from the humans, pushed themselves beyond what they thought possible. "Remember," Lisa said to the group, "we're in this together. No one gets left behind. We all finish, or none of us do." The test began with cold, the temperature dropping rapidly. The Karathi immediately felt the discomfort, but now they knew what to do. They controlled their breathing, worked with their shivering, instead of against it. The humans positioned themselves between the Karathi and the worst of the cold air currents, using their bodies as shields. "Form a circle," Jack instructed. "Share body heat. This is how humans survived ice ages." They pressed together, Karathi and human sharing warmth. Kirval was struggling, his smaller frame losing heat quickly. Kyle put his arm around the young scientist, pulling him into the center of the group. "You've got this," Kyle encouraged. "We're all here with you." The temperature rose suddenly, switching from cold to heat. Now the Karathi had an advantage. Their species handled heat better than humans. Velnara showed Lisa how to position herself to maximize cooling. while other Karathi fanned the humans with their multiple arms. "See?" Lisa said through the discomfort. "We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. Together, we're complete." Physical challenges came next. Obstacles to climb, weights to move, problems that required multiple people to solve. Jack's engineering mind quickly identified solutions, but he needed the Karathi's extra arms and different perspective to implement them. "Zekthul, can you reach that panel? Kyle, support his weight. Velnara, you're lighter, you can go through that passage." They worked as a unit, each contributing what they could. When someone struggled, others helped. When someone excelled, they lifted others up. Then came the emotional test. The chamber filled with holographic scenes of loss, fear, and pain. But this time, it showed both human and Karathi suffering. The participants saw their worlds in danger, their people in need. "This is the hard part," Lisa said, "but we face it together." The Karathi were overwhelmed by the emotional stimuli they had never learned to process. But the humans were there, coaching them through it. "It's okay to feel," Jack told Zekthul, who was watching his homeworld burn in the simulation. "Feel it, accept it, but don't let it control you. Use it as fuel to do better, to be better." Meanwhile, the Karathi helped the humans through their own emotional challenges. When Kyle saw his sister in danger again, Kirval stood beside him. "She's not real," the young Karathi said, "but your love for her is. That love makes you strong. Use it." Hours passed. The challenges grew harder, combining multiple stressors at once: cold and physical exertion, heat and problem-solving, emotional stress and endurance tests. But something beautiful was happening. The group was becoming more than the sum of its parts. When Velnara collapsed from exhaustion, Lisa and Jack carried her. When Kyle's muscles finally gave out, 3 Karathi supported him. When Zekthul's resolve wavered, the entire group surrounded him, encouraging him. "This is what we've been trying to show you," Jack said as they neared the 8-hour mark. "Humans don't endure pain because we're tough. We endure it because we're not alone. We have each other." "And now," Lisa added, looking at the Karathi, "around her, you have us, and we have you." The final challenge was the hardest. Each participant had to cross a narrow beam while carrying weight, with extreme temperature fluctuations and sensory disorientation. It was nearly impossible alone. But they didn't do it alone. They formed a chain, each person supporting the next. When someone wavered, hands reached out to steady them. When someone fell, others caught them. Humans and Karathi, working as one. Zekathol was the last to cross. His legs shook with exhaustion, his 4 eyes could barely focus. The weight he carried seemed impossibly heavy, but Jack was in front of him, reaching back. Velnara was behind him, ready to catch him if he fell. Kyle and Lisa called encouragement from the finish point. "One more step," Jack said. "You've got this, Commander. We're all here with you." Zekthul took that step, then another. When he finally crossed the finish line, the entire group erupted in celebration. They had done it, all of them together. As they sat recovering, sharing water and food, something had fundamentally changed. They weren't captors and prisoners anymore. They weren't even researchers and subjects. They were something new. "I need to document this," Zekthul said, his voice tired but wondering. "But I don't know how. We came here to study human pain tolerance, but that's not what we found." "No," Lisa agreed. "You found something better. You found that pain tolerance isn't about individuals. It's about community. It's about having something worth enduring for." Kyle looked around at the mixed group of humans and Karathi. "You wanted to know our secret. It's simple. Humans don't face pain alone. We face it together. And now, so do you." Over the following days, the entire dynamic of the ship changed. The test had broken down the last barriers between the species. Karathi and humans trained together, learned from each other, shared meals and stories. Zekthul called a formal meeting with the 3 humans. "We need to discuss your future," he said. "You're free to go, of course. We'll return you to your colony ship immediately if you wish." Or, Jack asked, sensing there was more. Or you could stay, Velnara said. Not as subjects, but as partners. Teachers, bridge builders between our species. The humans exchanged glances. They had discussed this possibility during their captivity, planning for various outcomes. We have a counter-proposal, Lisa said. We'll help you establish a program. An exchange between our species, humans and Karathi learning from each other. Not about pain tolerance, but about strength, resilience, and what different species can teach each other. Your people evolved on a paradise world, Jack added. Ours evolved on a death world. Both paths led to intelligence, to spaceflight, to this moment. Imagine what we could accomplish by combining our perspectives. Kyle smiled. Plus, I've got about 30 Karathi who just started their fitness journey. Can't leave them hanging now. The agreement was reached within days. The 3 humans would return to their colony, but not alone. A delegation of Karathi would go with them, including Velnara and Kirval. They would establish the first human Karathi resilience exchange program. Zekthul's final report was unlike anything he had written before. We set out to study human pain tolerance. We discovered something far more valuable. Pain tolerance cannot be measured in simple metrics. It is not a biological constant, but a variable that depends on purpose, community, and choice. The humans endured our tests not because they are immune to suffering, but because they transform suffering into growth. They taught us that pain is not an enemy to be avoided, but a teacher to be understood. They showed us that true strength comes not from never falling, but from helping each other stand back up. Most importantly, we learned that we were never studying them. They were studying us, teaching us, preparing us for this moment of